Hey guys, it's Jessica. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing every book that I read in the month of September. Overall, I think September was a pretty great month for my reading. I read a mix of fantasy, science fiction, and horror that I really enjoyed. And it's a lot of books, so we are just going to get started and go through them. I'm going to start with the books that I did not finish, my DNFs of the month, and then I'm going to start at the lower end of my rating scale and work my way up to my favorite book of the month. I was doing really well all month this month and not DNFing any books, and then I got to the last week of the month and I DNF'd 2. So that's all right though. I'm glad that I gave them a chance and I realized they weren't right for me, and I'm going to tell you why they weren't right for me. But just because I didn't like them doesn't mean that they were not good books. So the first book I DNF'd is going to be When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. This is a horror novel that is about a waitress named Jess who comes across a young boy who is on the run from his father. She decides to take him in and protect him, and they go on the run together. And the story, the mystery, I guess, of this horror story is exactly what is going on. Like, what the heck is going on with actually quite a lot of things. I'm going to tell you why I didn't like this one. I think that it's just a very specific style of horror that does not work for me. I read about 35% of this book, and I can see that it's very fast paced, it's very exciting, but for me, it felt a little bit shouty. I like things that are a little bit more like slow burn, creepy horror, and this was like in your face horror, much more than I really particularly enjoy. I also did not care for the main character, Jess, who you were following the entire time. And this book does a lot of kind of messing with your sense of reality in a way that just made me feel really disoriented and anxious. And it just was not a pleasant reading experience for me. But having said that, it did give a really strong emotional reaction for me. So I think that if it sounds like something you would enjoy, I would recommend it. I think the author has a very specific writing style, which I had not experienced before, and which, as I said, did not work for me, but I can definitely see why so many people have been saying that this is the scariest book they have read all year. The next book that I DNF'd was actually not originally on my September TBR. I ended up adding it because I wanted to get a start on my fall TBR, which if you want to see that, I will link a video down below. And it is The Good House by Tananarive. And I feel so sad that I DNF'd this book. Tananarive is an author that I have really enjoyed in the past. The Reformatory is one of my favorite books, kind of all time, but definitely one of my favorite horror novels. And this is the story of a woman named Angela and a house that she has inherited from her grandmother, and the mysterious things and the mysterious past and history of the things that have happened in and around this house in this small town. At the very beginning of the book, we have some events happen. I'm not going to spoil them. And then we flash forward and Angela is going back to the house and revisiting it and kind of dealing with her past. And Tananarive is a very strong writer. She writes characters really well. She writes these kind of like slow burn stories very well. But for me, this was just a little bit too much of a slow burn. It is 600 pages long and I read 30% of it. So I read about 200 pages and I just didn't feel that the story was moving quickly enough for me. I felt like there wasn't a lot of creepiness going on, which is kind of what I wanted from a haunted house book. And I also, similar to the first book that I already talked about, just could not connect to our main character, Angela. I found her a little bit frustrating. And so I did end up DNFing it because I was not finding myself wanting to pick it up, which is the kind of thing that'll put me in a reading slump. So I went ahead and DNF'd it. But I'm not saying it's a bad book again. I actually feel really sad about this one, but I will totally read anything that she puts out now. But this one was just a little bit too slow paced for me and the mood that I was in right now. So now we're going to go to the books that I did finish, and we are going to start with my lowest rated book and go all the way up to the 1 5-star read that I had this month. So we're going to start with something that I rated 3-star, which is a totally fine rating for me. 3 stars is it was okay, but I didn't really love it, but I would still recommend it. So coming in at 3 stars, which is not a bad rating for me, I do have Ocean's Godori by Elaine Cho. This is the story of Ocean, who is a pilot in the Alliance, which is Korea's kind of space navy, I guess is the best way to say it. And in this book, she is doing a lot of things, but it does say inside the cover on the description, she is trying to prove that one of her friends did not commit a murder that he is accused of. Okay, so the beginning of this book is super exciting. It opens on a real actiony scene, and you're like, what is going on? And then it kind of really slowed down for me. And it turned into, I would say, a little bit more of a cozy science fiction story than I was expecting. I was expecting a fast-paced space opera. I got cozy found family, which is a thing that I do like, but it's not what I was expecting. And I did find myself having a difficult time connecting with a lot of the characters within this. And I also will caution you that if you read this book, you are going to need to read the second book, because I would not say this first volume of this duology has a proper conclusion. So you will need to read the second book. So just be aware that when you commit yourself to this book, you are also committing yourself to that second book. And I liked this okay. I thought it was all right, but it just didn't knock my socks off the way that I wanted it to, so to speak. So it was just okay. 3 stars. All right, then. Now we're up to 3.5 stars, which is, what would I say about a 3.5 star rating for me? I would say 3.5 is, I liked it. And that's kind of about it, but I probably had a couple things I didn't like as much. So the first book I'm going to talk about here is The Possession of Alba Díaz by Isabel Cañas. This was one of my most highly anticipated books for fall. It was on my fall TBR. I saw it at the library and I was so excited to be able to get a copy of it to read. And it just kind of disappointed me a little bit. And I think that's because I had such high expectations going into it because of how much I love The Hacienda by the same author, which is a Mexican retelling of the story Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is a possession novel, obviously, from the title. We follow a girl named Alba who has just become engaged to her best friend, Carlos. And there is a sickness that sweeps through the town that they live in. And so, along with all their families, they go to visit the silver mine that Carlos's family owns. And I do have to tell you that if you've ever wanted to learn about historical silver mining techniques, there is much. There is so much historical detail in this book. And I think it's both a blessing and something that this author does so very, very well as being a little bit of a victim of its own success, because I think she spends so much time giving you the backdrop and the history and the details of how this would have worked that it made the story feel like it was moving a little bit slower for me than I really wanted it to. I don't think that the possession that you find in the title really comes into play that much until the second half of the book, which is quite a lot. And then once it happened, once we had a possession, I think I realized that possession books just aren't really my favorite. I was a little bit bored by it, especially, in these books, if you get like the perspective of the person who's possessed, I don't know. It robbed it of the mystery for me. It wasn't scary. There is a romance within this book, which had a very kind of insta-love feel to it. And I also did not like that. I didn't buy into it. The characters were hard for me to connect to. I thought they were just all right. And again, this is not the Isabel Cañas book that I would recommend. So if you've read all her other books and you want to give this one a try and see how you feel, it does have great atmosphere. She's a great character writer. The historical details are amazing. But if you're looking for something scary, or you're looking for that same feel of romantic yearning that you got in something like The Hacienda, I don't think you're going to find it here, to be honest. I thought this book was just okay. And next, at 3.5 stars, we have Artificial Wisdom by Thomas Weaver. And this book has a cool cover. I really enjoy it. I'm sorry for all these library copies. Well, I'm not sorry, because you should use your library. But I'm sorry that they're so hard to see on camera. So Artificial Wisdom is the story of a reporter named Tully, and he is living in a kind of, I think, a near-ish future Earth where we have had absolutely catastrophic climate change, climate disasters, heat that will kill you, floods that have flooded and made uninhabitable huge parts of the planet. And we also are dealing in this society with a great deal of social unrest and social stratification. So we have the very, very wealthy who have kind of created actually like their own island with a bubble on it that has a good atmosphere that they live in, and they just ignore everybody else, that kind of thing. And Tully is an investigative reporter. He finds himself through a series of events on this island for rich people, where he meets an artificial intelligence that is actually one of the final two candidates to be what they are referring to as dictator of the world. Yes, the idea of having an election for a dictator is strange, but they do explain it well. I didn't mind it. And the AI is actually going up against the former American president in this case, who feels very much like a stand-in for some actual US politicians. So I was very excited about this. I loved the concept of, would an AI be better at making the hard decisions that we need to make? I thought that idea was really cool, but I don't know that this book was as interested in exploring it as I wanted it to be. We got about 25–30% of the way through, and all of a sudden it turned into a mystery. It turned into a murder mystery story for a great large percentage of the book, and then I did not care for the way the book wrapped up. I felt like it was rushed. So I don't want to spoil any more of the plot for you than that, but if you're thinking it's going to be about the cool AI stuff, I don't really think it was as much as I wanted it to. It was kind of many genres put together in a way that I really wasn't expecting. So I thought this was okay. I was entertained. I read it very quickly, but it's not a book that's going to stick with me, and it did not really touch super heavily on a lot of those philosophical themes that I was very interested in, which is something that I really like in science fiction. So 3.5 stars. I would recommend checking it out if it sounds good to you, but it was not my absolute favorite. Now we're going to move on to some 4-star reads. 4 stars for me are probably, it's almost a little bit of a default rating for me. 4-star is, I really liked it. I would recommend it. There's something that kept it from being a 5-star. So I'm going to tell you the things that I really loved about these books and the things that didn't work for me quite as well. But overall, these are all books that I would highly recommend that you check out. And we are going to start with Daughter of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wurts. And I'm going to give you this cover up close so you can really admire the general 1980s of this cover. I don't read a lot of classic fantasy, but it's something that I have really been wanting to explore. I feel like it's a gap in my knowledge, so I decided to go ahead and start with this. This is a trilogy that is within the Rift War saga by Raymond E. Feist. You can read it separately. You can read it as a self-contained set of 3 books. It doesn't talk a lot about stuff from the first trilogy, as far as I can tell. I didn't feel like there was anything really that I didn't understand. In this book, we are following Mara, and Mara is a princess who has decided to dedicate herself to a life of prayer. She's decided to become a nun. And just as she is about to take her final vows at the very, very beginning of the book, her father's men come to her and tell her that there has been a horrible event and she will now be the ruling lady of her house. So she finds herself suddenly in charge of a household full of servants, of all of these farmers who work the lands, and of an entire army. All things that she was not trained for, because this should have fallen to her brother. I saw this recommended, I have seen this recommended a lot as kind of an early example of a very feminist kind of fantasy. And I think that's an interesting way to describe it. I can see where Mara herself is an extremely groundbreaking character. She's not somebody who falls into a lot of stereotypes. She is a character who is very, very stereotypically feminine. She is sweet, but she's also like a master schemer. Okay, she's always got a scheme going on. She's got some way that she and her people are going to come out on top. And I do think it's interesting too, and this is not a criticism of the book, but it's just something that I observed, which is that instead of breaking the walls of the patriarchal society that Mara lives in, she instead works within that system to gain an advantage while still using the structures of that patriarchy. And I think that's a really interesting choice at times for me as a modern reader. And I think at times that was a little bit frustrating to me. I wanted her to just not do the thing that everyone wanted her to do, but I think that overall, I think it was very interesting. I really enjoyed this first book. It wasn't perfect for me. I did feel a little bit of distance with the characters. I never felt like Mara was a character I could really root for or that I necessarily really understood. There was a little bit of head hopping within this book, which I know is super common within fantasies of this time period. It's not something that I really enjoy, and it's always very jarring to me when it happens, but I am planning to continue this series. I will tell you all that this book was about 450 pages long, and the second book of this trilogy is twice as long as that, and that's awfully long. So I'm going to need to be probably talked into it a little bit, but I had a really good time, and I'm really glad that I read it. I read this piece of fantasy history, and I'm really excited to read more books by both of these authors, but particularly Janny Wurts. I really want to read something that she wrote just on her own. So if anyone would like to recommend to me where to start after you've already read this one, go ahead and leave a comment and let me know. Next, at 4 stars, we have something very, very different from any of these books, and that is An Ancient Witch's Guide to Modern Dating by Cecelia Edward. This is a kind of fluffy, cozy romance mystery, time travel story for fall. I mean, I thought it was super, super, super adorable. In this, we are following Thorn. Thorn is a witch in the 17th century, and she has been unable to find a suitable husband. She has even resorted to using the local matchmaker. She is getting love potions. She's brewing her own love potions because, of course, she is a witch. And then something goes wrong, and she finds herself transported to current day, where her witch's hut that she lives in is being used as a museum. That's a great setup. I love that. I thought the character of Thorn was just super fun. I loved her cat Familiar. I love the fact that she can actually speak to all cats as a witch, and the cats are fun. The cat plot line in this book is probably my favorite thing about it, to be honest. This is a rom-com. There is a romance. It is kind of a, I'd say friends to lovers kind of situation. It's hard to really give a good trope to this one when one of the characters comes from the 17th century. I will tell you that she does try a little bit of online dating and a little bit of speed dating and all of the ridiculous modern dating things that we have. And I just thought looking at that through her viewpoint was super fun. My quibble with this book, which I said in my weekly update about this, is that I didn't appreciate the fact that the book kept pointing out how old the 39-year-old main character was. I'm sure that in the 17th century, she was a super old maid, but constantly talking about how ancient and wizened and crone-like she was just didn't really work for me. Now, the message of the book is not about that, but I would say that if you liked what are the books? They have the ones with the long titles, and The Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping, Sengu Mandana's books. I think that you would really, really enjoy this. I found this to be very similar, and also she has a blurb on the front. So I do think that if you enjoyed those books and you're kind of wanting more of that same feeling, I think that this would be perfect. I haven't seen anybody talking about this book, so I don't know how big of a release it got, but I thought it was really fun. I thought it was well written, and y'all know that I am so hard to please with a romance. I DNF or dislike most of the ones that I read, and I thought this one was really good, so give it a try. Next at 4 stars, I did read this past week, was also on my TBR, Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. This is book number 6 in the Expanse series. And I would say that this book is kind of a direct continuation of book 5. So all of the events that happened in book 5 are just going to continue on. This is almost like an extended, I don't want to say epilogue because there's more to it than that, but it definitely builds off of those events, whereas the previous books in this series had been very episodic. So everything within the book was kind of contained. Now, I really love The Expanse. I adore these characters, and I did think that book 5, the one that this is really a sequel to, is the best book in the series, easily. But I really struggled with this one a little bit. I'm going to give it 4 stars because I love these characters so much in the series, so much that I can't give it less than 4 stars. But this book had so many POVs. So many. The previous book had given us, I think, 4. So just basically the 4 main characters that you're following through most of the series were the POV characters. And in this book, I mean, I think I read somewhere in a review that there were 19, and I would believe that there were 19 POVs. Some of them just for like a really short, brief 2-page chapter, maybe 2. Some of them were characters that were brought back from a previous book that I had to take a minute and go, wait, who are you? Which is probably just a me thing. But I did have a good time. It did wrap up. I felt like a lot of the events that happened in book 5, which we definitely needed. I didn't like it as much. It's probably my lowest rated book of the series so far, I think, but still a good book. And I am really looking forward to books 6 through 9 and completing the series, which I think I'm going to wait and read those next year because my goal for this year was to read 3 Expanse books, which I have just finished. So I have completed one of my yearly reading goals. Very excited. But this was decent. I always recommend this series. I just love this series so much. Okay, now we are up to 4.5 stars. The books that were almost perfect for me, but maybe had just one thing, just didn't give me that 5-star feeling. So the first one I'm going to give you is The Hexologists, A Tangle of Time by Josiah Bancroft. Show you this lovely cover. I love this series. This is a fantasy mystery series. I had read The Hexologists, the first book in the series, when it came out last year, I think. And I, of course, had to get this one right away. I did read this as an advanced reader copy, and then I went and I picked up my own copy once it came out and recommended it super highly to the bookseller at Barnes & Noble that I bought it from. So this is a great series. In this, we are following a married couple. Their names are Isolde and Warren, and I just love them. I love them so much. They are, I say this every time I talk about this series, but they are couple goals. They are proof that just because you're reading a book about an established couple, an established romance, it doesn't have to be boring. I love them so much together. And in this one, and they're kind of like, they're kind of like mystical detectives. She is a hexologist, which means that she does hexes, which there's a very specific way of describing the magic system in this book. I'm not even going to try to get into it right now, but I thought the magic system was actually pretty much a hard magic system, very well explained. As a fantasy mystery, I think it's great. I think you could solve the mystery if you wanted to. I think it follows mystery rules. I think the fantasy is actually really well done. As I said, hard magic system, a lot of consistency in the world, and a lot more complicated world building than I think you might expect from something like this. If you enjoyed Robert Jackson Bennett's Shadow of the Leviathan series, if you liked The Tainted Cup and its sequel, A Drop of Corruption, and you're looking for more fantasy mystery to read, I have read a lot of fantasy mystery. And this is actually the series that I would recommend that you go to next because I think it has the most similar feel. It is a little bit more lighthearted than that. It does have a lot of humor to it, but Josiah Bancroft has a very unique writing style. He is extremely descriptive, so whether you're going to like this or not may depend on how much world building description you enjoy, but I personally really enjoy it. And I love the characters and I love the mystery that they solved in this one, which was involving of time travel, of course, as it says on the cover, but it's much more complicated than that. You're definitely going to want to check it out. I would not recommend starting with this book. I would recommend if you want to read the series, start with book 1 because there are things that happen in the first book that are built upon in this book. Although I do think you could read this and understand it, but I think you would miss things. And the first book's really good, so definitely start with that one. But highly recommended, 4.5 stars. So glad I got to read it. Can't wait for the next book. The next 4.5 star book I have was such a shock to me. I picked this up for one of my TBRs as kind of a random library choice. I do go to the library every month and pick up a couple books that I just think sound good. I had read previous books from this author and I hadn't necessarily loved them, but this book was so good and I cannot wait for the sequel, and that is Grave Empire by Richard Swan. This book is so good. It is a fantasy horror novel. When I say horror, I mean there is a lot of gore in this book. Please be aware that it is not a light book. It does have humor within it. It's not a totally grim, dark, horrible, everything is awful world, but it's a fantasy horror novel. You're definitely going to have some stuff in it. So this is the story of an ambassador named Renata who has gone on a little bit of a quest with these 2 monks to discover the meaning of something called, I believe, the Great Silence. And it's a lot more than that. We have several POVs, actually, I think 3 main POVs within this book, all of which were great. I liked Renata the best. One of my complaints about the author's previous series was that I didn't like the main female character of that series. I just didn't feel like it was a well-written female character, to be honest, and none of that here. Renata is a fully formed character, so good, so great. So maybe I just didn't like that character. But I thought this was fantastic, and I would highly recommend it. I don't want to really spoil anything about it. If that setup sounds good to you, if you like a fantasy horror novel, this would be perfect for the fall, definitely. It's definitely got a real fall vibe to it. The cover is extremely, I would say, fall themed. And I highly recommend this one. It was really good. Next, we have a science fiction book, 4.5 stars. We have The Heist of Hollow London by Eddie Robson. This is I would say it's obviously a heist story. You can tell because it's called The Heist of Hollow London. It's a heist story, a heist science fiction story in which we are following Arlo and Drienne, who are both maids, spelled M-A-D-E-S. They are clones of wealthy company members within the society that is very much ruled by corporations. And one of the things that happens with them is that after they are created, they have to spend their lives paying down the debt of their own creation. And yet, at any point, they might be called to give their lives for a body part for one of these executives that they are clones of. I mean, it is crazy. And so the question is, when you have these people, these kind of indentured servants who belong to a corporation, what happens to them when the corporation fails? And that's the setup for the book. And of course, there's going to be a heist. I'm not going to spoil anything about the heist for you. I thought this book was really good. I was sent this by Tor to try out, and I thought it sounded like it would be interesting, but I honestly was not expecting it to be as good as it was. It has a really fast-paced plot. It has a fair amount of humor in it, but it's also really interested in talking about these ideas of what it means to be human, what it means to be a person, and what does it mean when you have a society where you have all of these people who don't have the same rights as those who are naturals, who were born. I just thought it was really, really good. And emotionally, it hit me hard. I loved the characters. I think there are a lot of people who probably haven't heard of this book who would really, really love it. I think it's going to be, if you liked something like, I'm trying to think of some comp titles, I would say Six of Crows because of the heist aspect. This isn't quite as epic as Six of Crows. It's a much smaller story. It's only 288 pages. But I think if you liked that, I think that you might also really enjoy this. I think if you liked a lot of the kind of serial kinds of science fiction that you see, I think if you like things like the Red Rising series, again, this is different, but I think if you liked Red Rising, this feels similar to me in a lot of ways, and I think you might really enjoy it. But I would recommend checking this one out. I just had a really, really great time with it. I just tore through it. Like, I read it in a day and a half. I thought it was so, so good. And then my last 4.5 star book, my almost perfect book that I have for you, is The Second Death of Locke by B.L. Bovalino. This is a fantasy romance. I'm going to describe it as a fantasy romance and not a romantasy because I do feel that the fantasy aspects of it were a little bit more of the point than the romance, but the romance is a very heavy aspect. So if you don't like romance in your fantasy, you're not going to like this. But I think it's a good balance, and that's what I'm always looking for. I'm always looking for something that maybe has a fun or a romantic romance in it, but also gives me that this is a real world kind of feeling that the best fantasy can give you. And this one does it really well. And it also has an absolutely gorgeous cover. I will be buying this book soon. I will be purchasing a real copy of it to put on my shelves. This is the first book in a trilogy. The author has said that they are all going to be standalones following different people within the same universe. So what is this book about? This book is about Gray and Kier. Gray is a female knight who is well, which means that she is someone who her mage, Kier, is able to draw power from in battle. And at the kind of near the beginning of this book, they are sent off on a quest to try to deliver a missing family member of one of the ruling families of the land. And of course, a lot of things are going to come up. There are a lot of secrets. There's a lot of stuff going on that you're not going to know at the beginning of the book. And I just thought I thought it was really good. I was kind of invested the whole time, even at the beginning when it was an on the road kind of story, which is not a thing I necessarily enjoy. There is a little bit of a found family aspect to this. As I said, I thought the world building was decent. I didn't think that everything in the world totally made sense or was explained completely, but there are going to be more books in the series, and it was enough for me to feel invested. How about the romance? The romance was fine. I liked him. It's friends to lovers, which is the thing that I like because I don't like a lot of unnecessary drama in things, and this did not have a lot of unnecessary drama, thank goodness. A lot of You know, if you get like the third act breakup in a romance novel for just no reason other than the fact that they needed to break up, I will quit reading. I am not here for that. I am too old for that. That's how I feel about all of that stuff. So this book was very nice in that aspect. I wasn't obsessed with them, but I thought they were fine. And I did really enjoy the story of the mysterious Locke that you hear about in the title. I'm not going to spoil anything about it. You're going to want to find everything about this world out for yourself. But I just thought it was really good, and I would highly, highly recommend it. And now we have the 1 5-star read that I had this month, and that is The Last Devil to Die by Richard Osman. This is book number 4 in the Thursday Murder Club series, and I have read the last 2 books, books 3 and 4, in the last 2 months. And I read originally the Thursday Murder Club when it first came out, I think in 2020. And I have to tell you guys that I actually think that this was the best book of the series so far. It was an easy 5-star for me. You can definitely see the growth that Richard Osman has as a writer, where he's able to tackle some really tough subjects in such a sensitive and thoughtful and poetic kind of way, which is not something you think about for a mystery novel, especially not a cozy mystery novel that also is quite funny. I love these characters so much. I would just do anything for these characters. I just absolutely love them. I do have a lot. I'm going to have a longer review of this probably in the specific weekly update video where I read it. I don't want to get into it because I'm going to get emotional talking about it again, but I just think this was just about the perfect mystery novel, perfect story with a group of friends that you've come to care about, who love each other so much. And this is just a really special series. And if you have never read the Thursday Murder Club, I cannot highly recommend it enough. It has some books that are better than others. My opinion, the third book is the weakest book in the series so far. I haven't read the new one that just came out, but I just absolutely loved this so much. 5 stars, and can't wait to read the next one, but I am probably going to give it a few months to recover. So that's all the books that I read this month. It was overall a pretty good reading month. I did have 2 DNFs, as I said, and a couple of things that were just kind of okay for me. And I am trying to think a little bit more analytically about the things that I enjoy and where my mind is in terms of my reading. And I did notice this month very distinctly that books where I could not connect with the characters, where there was a distance between the reader and the characters, or just a distance from me personally from those characters, I did not enjoy. And I do think that brings into focus for me a little bit the fact that I am kind of a little bit of a character-focused reader. I need characters to feel like real people, and I really struggle with books where the characters don't feel like real people, even if it's on purpose. But I had overall, I would say, a really, really great month, and I would recommend many of these books to you all. And I hope that you all had a great September for reading, because mine was pretty good. And I would love if you would leave me a comment and let me know what the best thing you read in September was. And also let me know what the worst thing you read was, because I want the tea on that. And if you're feeling quiet, go ahead and leave me the fox emoji in honor of the Thursday Murder Club, which all have little foxes on the covers. And with that, I hope you all have a fantastic day. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.